Good evening. If you are new to my channel, I'm Gordon Cossey. This is Candy the Wonder Dog. Should have been named COVID or Corona. I always say that. I have a lot of videos out there. I repeat myself a lot. Uh, should have been named COVID or Corona because she came into the house on March 18th of the year 2020. She's hardly a pup anymore. Although I still call her Candy the Wonder Pup, she still is filled with puppy energy. She is a Border Collie Aussie Shepherd cross. And she has trained me very well. At the start of all my videos, I give her a treat, and she won't give me any peace until she gets it. So sit, shake a paw, lay down, speak. Oh, good. Get right in there. And that is Candy. Welcome to my latest live stream. And again, Gordon Cossey. Today is January the 23rd, 2025. I guess we're how many days in? 4 days into the Trump presidency. And I'm going to be talking today about the total, what I understand to be the total declassification of all information related to the assassinations, plural, of JFK, John F. Kennedy, RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. But before I get rolling, I want to first of all say thank you to everyone who has subscribed to the channel. The social media space is very crowded. Lots of individuals such as myself trying to inject their voice into the public discourse. That's how I like to frame it. And it's a crowded space. And whether or not I have anything worthwhile to contribute to that discourse, of course, is up to the viewer. But if you do believe that I have something worthwhile to inject, if I do frame things in a way that perhaps you hadn't considered before, or you're interested in different perspectives, whatever the case, if you enjoy this content, I would invite you to subscribe. I'm up to in and around 1,100. I'm in the social media sphere. I am a guppy in the ocean that is the world of YouTube. I don't even qualify as a tuna. And I'm not. 1,100's okay. That's great. I would like it to be more, sure, because that means the more subscribers you have, what that does is it increases the promotion of your channel, and more eyes have the potential to see it. So you're welcome to hit that subscribe button. And if you want to be notified when I'm going live, which is several times a week. Sometimes I'll go many days in a row. Then I'll take a couple days off at times. You can hit the notification bell. I'm sure you already know how to do it. This is a very low production value, very bare bones basic station. I call it my miserable, pathetic little YouTube station. And I like to think, I hope it speaks to a degree of authenticity. I'm not putting lipstick on a pig. And normally, I quite often have a number of people jumping on to the live stream, but for whatever reason, I don't see anyone jumping on right now. We'll see if that changes. Normally, the live chat is quite busy. I have a number of individuals who come on regularly. The commentary is awesome. It's engaging. A lot of intelligent discourse taking place. I learn a lot of things. But I see I do have someone watching right now. I will guess that it's Danny F.E. That's what he goes by. At any rate, I have my coffee. I am a professing Christian. I consider myself, I say this often, the poster child for a bit of an old poster child, but the poster child for cancel culture in this liberal world we live in, where anyone like myself, 58-year-old Christian, male, straight, white. And so your opinion, you shut up and sit down, boomer, and tune into the nightly news. They'll tell you what to think. They'll tell you what to believe. They'll even tell you how to feel about things. And this is more or less my little way of saying to the for lack of a better expression, to the masters of the matrix. I have Sharunian has shown up, and she's written, I always do that to Sharunian. Sharunian is a guy, but Sharunian comes across as Sharon, at least in my mind. Sharunian is writing that I'm almost 59 years old. Getting there. And when we talk about the assassination of JFK, we're talking about something that happened before I was even born. 3 years or so before I was born. JFK, of course, was assassinated in November 22nd. I've written it down. My memory isn't that good for specific minute dates. I can generally get years right, but not months and days. So November 22nd, November 22, 1963. And then, of course, following his assassination 4 years later, in April of 5 years later, four plus years later, April 4, 1968, that's when Martin Luther King was assassinated. Now I'm alive at this point. I'm not even 2 years of age yet when Martin Luther King was assassinated. And then a few months after that, 1968, RFK, Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated. It was quite a tumultuous time. During this period, during the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy Jr., I was living, not that I remember much or anything of the time, I was living in Staten Island, New York, in New York City, one of the boroughs of New York. My dad used to work in Manhattan, the Wall Street district. He took the Staten Island ferry into work every day. Just going to try and keep up with the live chat. Nothing else is being written. Sharunian, you're welcome to fill it up. Thanks for aging me. Almost 59, pushing 60. And I had a number of thoughts I wanted to share today. But in terms of the JFK assassination in particular, this is, as I say in the description, this is catnip for conspiracy theorists, because I think there are a lot of, and firstly, let me put to bed any of this idea that conspiracy theorists are tinfoil hat wearing nut bars. Let's face it, most reasonably intelligent people are aware of the fact that powerful interests do conspire. What a shock. A conspiracy is simply two or more people acting in concert to deceive. And when that involves criminal activity, then you're into criminal conspiracy. So getting on to JFK, I think I'm going to join in with all those commentators who are saying, do not expect to see anything any smoking gun, any massive revelation, this is definitive proof of exactly what happened on that day in Dallas, Texas, back in November of 1963. That is not going to happen. I could be wrong, but that's my take. I don't think that I don't think we're going to get a definitive answer. However, what I do think is very likely to come out of I'll call it the document dump, when they declassify. I've been reading an article on it. There are about 3,000, it is guesstimated that there are about 3,000 documents that continue to be classified. And I think they've been given something in the neighborhood of 15 days to declassify all the information on JFK, and then I think it's 45 days for declassification with respect to the assassinations of Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy Jr., or John F. Kennedy's younger brother, RFK, who during the Kennedy administration, RFK, Robert Kennedy, was John F. Kennedy's attorney general. But what I do think will be dispelled once these documents are released, I think it will pretty much blow apart anyone who contends that Lee Harvey Oswald was a sole actor. that acting alone from the book depository overlooking Dealey Square in Dallas, Texas, with a bolt action rifle, that he was able to get off the shot that killed John F. Kennedy and the whole magic bullet theory. I think that entire supposition will be blown to bits. What I see happening is a multitude of questions that we will never get the answers to. The live chat is now filling up. Hank Holiday from Texas, great state of Texas, has shown up, as has Danny F.E., who I mentioned earlier, from Montreal, Canada. My home and native land, to quote our national anthem. Oh, Canada, my home and native land. I wonder if that'll ever get changed, if they'll change the wording of that because of the word native. But I don't want to digress too much tonight. What I do think we're going to see happening is they're going to be pointing to a number of different potential players that I believe genuinely were acting in concert. A lot of people wanted John F. Kennedy. I've gotten so used to saying RFK now with the nomination of RFK Jr. as health secretary under Trump. I've gotten so used to saying RFK, I'm not used to saying JFK. Something's being written, and oh, please don't give me trouble. I'm on a tablet, and I'm having trouble at times bringing up the live chat. It's been better of late, but oh, there we go. Just a little persistence. Danny's writing, change it back to all thy sons command. I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson, something I learned. The original lyrics to O Canada, written before World War I had broken out, were, in us thou dost command. In us thou dost, D-O-S-T, command. That the way Weir, the original composer, the writer of the English language lyrics, the way he originally composed it, the words were, in us thou dost command. But then at the outbreak of World War I, that was changed from in us thou dost command to in all thy sons command. And the reason for thy sons was because Canada was sending its men, only men, overseas to fight in World War I against the Central Powers. And it made sense to honor those unlimited liability. They were going, many went to their deaths in us, in all thy sons command. And no one complained. No one complained about them changing it from in us thou dost command to in all thy sons command. But as originally written, it was in us thou dost command. And when they did the most recent update to the lyrics, which have changed repeatedly over the course of history, God keep our land glorious and free was not in the original version. Listen to, go back into the 1970s and listen to an old Hockey Night in Canada reproduction, and listen to how the anthem was sung. They just kept repeating, "Oh Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command." And they just kept repeating things over and over. The words "God keep our land" were not in the original version, and they didn't come in until 1970s, 80s. Let me see. Danny's writing something. I know there would be people used to have pride in Canada. We were once proud of our vets, like you and I. Yeah. Danny's a vet. I'm a vet. Left the military in 2021. But let me get back to JFK and his assassination. And what I think is going to be revealed is that there were a number of players involved who wanted JFK dead. How it was ultimately planned, who was ultimately behind it, we may never know, because who wanted JFK dead? I've done a fair bit of reading on this and watched a lot of documentaries. Old Joe Kennedy John F. Kennedy's dad, who was, I believe, ambassador to to England, had, over the course of his lifetime as a rum runner, had made a lot of political connections, a lot of connections with organized crime, and he used these connections to advance the political careers of his children. It was actually, he had a son named Joe Kennedy Jr., who was actually, in old Joe Kennedy's mind, he was the heir to the Kennedy legacy, and he was to be the one who was going to seek high political office, run for the Senate, Congress, and eventually for the presidency. But Joe Kennedy Sr. was killed, or rather Joe Kennedy Jr. was killed in action in World War II, and that vaulted John F. Kennedy Jr., and I keep doing the junior thing, I'm sorry, I'm just got to say JFK, Jack Kennedy, vaulted him up the rung, much the same way when Sonny Corleone was gunned down, Michael moved up. When Joe Kennedy Jr., Joe Kennedy Sr.'s eldest son, died in World War II, then Jack Kennedy moved up, and Joe Kennedy pulled the strings with organized crime, which were involved with the unions like the Teamsters, to help get his son elected. And then when John F. Kennedy became president, his younger brother, Robert Kennedy, as Attorney General, was going after the mob tooth and nail. So on the one hand, it strongly suggested in a lot of accounts that while the mafia was involved in helping to get Kennedy elected, then RFK went as Attorney General and was going after them tooth and nail. So you have a mob connection, potentially. Then you have Cuba, because the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon had been engaged in efforts to have Fidel Castro assassinated. And that's now been declassified already. And so during the Kennedy administration, the US administration, the Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was trying to assassinate a foreign leader. They had all kinds of plans, exploding cigars and other things. And so would the Cubans want retribution over efforts to try and kill their El Presidente? I think that's what they call Castro, or called him rather. And it certainly is reasonable to assume. Then what about within Kennedy's own government? What about the CIA? And this is, when Kennedy refused to provide air support for the Bay of Pigs invasion, expatriate Cubans who had fled Cuba after Castro's takeover had convinced U.S. intelligence services that they would be welcomed as liberators, and that it would be a walk in the park, but they wanted air cover. They wanted U.S. Air Force support for their invasion at the Bay of Pigs, and the Kennedy administration nixed that idea. And there was also Operation Northwoods. You can read a book by a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist by the name of James Bamford, Bamford, called Body of Secrets, and declassified documents about Operation Northwoods. And what Operation Northwoods was it was a plan put forward by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, again at that same Pentagon, that proposed that the U.S. engage in a false flag attack, that they sink ships, crash airplanes into buildings, and engage in other acts of domestic terrorism, and then to blame it on Cuba so that the American people and global public would support a war of invasion, take back their old playground. I'm going to read what's being written before I continue. Danny's writing, I've heard claims that experimental rifles were made by Europe Stoner, later known as the AR-15, but most of these involved are dead. So will we ever truly know? The day all those involved are dead, we're going back over 50 years. It's possible that there might have been someone in their 20s might have had some involvement. This was part of the justification for not releasing it. All the documents during Trump's first term is that there were individuals implicated in the files who were still alive, and it's potential that there are some individuals still alive in their 80s or 90s. Maybe a centurion, who knows, but certainly it's time to release the documents. But I think to a large degree, this is going to be a sideshow. We're not going to get any definitive answers. My best guess as to what happened is that you had a confluence of actors, and some of them possibly even foreign. When you get into intelligence area and you have moles, operatives within, I'm sure the Americans had operatives within the Castro government, operatives within the old Soviet Union. Remember, the Soviet Union had been obviously the big backer of Cuba and had prompted their attempt to install nuclear ballistic missiles on Cuban soil, led to the Cuban Missile Crisis. So there were a lot of moving parts here. And if there were elements within the US administration itself, the old inside job conspiracy, that suggesting that there were American governmental deep state type players who wanted to take Kennedy down, would they do it directly themselves, or might they operate through foreign interests, even adversarial interests, through their backdoor channels and their moles, agents, operatives? I think genuinely, I think the trail is so convoluted and cloudy that we will never have a definitive answer. I don't think there was one single reason why Kennedy was assassinated. I think there are a number of different reasons why he was assassinated. He wouldn't commit to the war in Vietnam. That angered the industrial military complex. He was going after organized crime tooth and nail. The Cubans were not happy because his administration was engaged in the attempted assassination of their leader. The Soviets certainly were engaged in a space race, and we were during this is pretty much the height of the Cold War was going on. So there's so many moving parts, and they very well, my suspicion is that they were acting in concert and muddying the waters to such a degree that we'll never get a definitive answer. The only answer that I hope comes out of it at best is that the official version, that the conclusion of the Warren Commission, that said Lee Harvey Oswald acting on his own, with a bolt action Italian rifle. Give me a break. That's pure fiction. What the truth is, I mean, it's almost like 9/11 to a degree. A lot of people question, reasonably intelligent people, including engineers and university professors and you name it, this concept that Osama bin Laden, hiding out in a cave in Afghanistan using old style flip phone type cell phone technology, was able to subvert the world's intelligence security apparatus, fly beneath the radar of everyone, and accomplish everything that was done that day. Please. But while the official version is, in my, obviously a crock, knowing exactly what happened definitively, we'll never know. Let me read, because a number of things are being written in the live chat. And I got it back working. Hank says he also changed the attack to the Bay of Pigs last minute himself. There's so much out there. Everyone's saying hi. Danny's of the opinion that CIA killed him. I think the CIA was involved. Did they pull the trigger? Did they get out of the way? There's another, distinct possibility. The CIA has released documents showing that Lee Harvey Oswald was um, under surveillance when he was in Mexico and visiting both the Cuban and the Russian embassies, or the Soviet embassy as it would have been back then. And so they had this guy, but did they make direct contact with Oswald, or did they allow other players to make contact, reach out to him, and involve him in a conspiracy? I mean, it was a conspiracy. If there are more than one person involved, automatically it's a conspiracy. It's more than two people acting together to commit a criminal deception, a criminal act, criminal conspiracy. That, to me, isn't in question. And I'm just reading. Hank Holliday's writing that Daddy Bush was the leader of the CIA at the time. I don't think George H.W. Bush was actually the head of the CIA at that time. He was a CIA agent, and he would eventually rise to be the director of the CIA. But I don't think he was a director. I'll have to double check this, but I don't think he was director of the CIA all the way back in 1963. Remember, George H.W. Bush became president in 1988 is when George H.W. Bush. So, it's 25 years later. I don't think George Bush H.W., the senior, the elder, I don't think he would have even been 30 back in 1963. So having a guy in his 20s, or maybe even just 30, as head of the CIA, I don't think so. And then, of course, Martin Luther King. You talk about a tumultuous era. We were living, my family was living in Staten Island, New York, when that happened. Next door to us was Mickey, who was a New York City cop. He worked in Manhattan. And on the night that Martin Luther King was assassinated, cities all across the United States, Detroit, Watts in Los Angeles, and a number of others, it was violent. Chicago, there was a lot of anger and a lot of violence, but in New York City, things were calm. And what happened was the mayor of the city at that time, John Lindsay, when he found out, he was at a play. He was watching a Broadway play, and from a private box, and was informed that Martin Luther King had just been assassinated. And he went to the mayor of New York City has an official residence, like the White House for the mayor. And he went to the official residence, he caught up on the news, and then he got a driver and hopped into his car and said, "Take me to Harlem," and walked the streets of Harlem in an era, April of 1968, with no internet, no social media, no cell phones. And he walked the streets, and the reporting says that the news that John Lindsay, that the mayor is out walking the streets of Harlem, spread throughout the community like wildfire, and everyone joined him. Not everyone, but a large crowd joined him and surrounded him. And the police department engaged in what some will know the term kettling, this idea of cordoning off and controlling a large crowd, which is dangerous. When you corner a large crowd, mob mentality thinking can take over. And John Lindsay walked up to the fire chief, or the officials in charge of setting up the barricades that were basically kettling this large march, and said, "Take those barriers down. We just want to go for a walk," and which is something that Martin Luther King Jr. was famous for. The March for Freedom to Washington, D.C., marching in Selma, in Mobile, it's where we, Montgomery, all these cities in Alabama that I would never otherwise know if it weren't for the civil rights movement in the southern U.S. And then, of course, 1968, you had the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, Sr., RFK Jr.'s dad. Killed, the official story is, by Sirhan Sirhan. Check out some commentary by RFK Jr., still alive, now touted as the next health secretary of the United States, who wants to make America's kids healthy again, and has been lambasted, smeared, slandered by the mainstream. They try to paint him as something of a kook, crackpot, conspiracy theorist, nut bar, which he is not. If you listen to him and park your preconceived notions, I think you'll find him to be a very thoughtful, cogent, reasonable voice, asking some questions that need to be asked. And these are questions that very powerful interests do not want asked, because if you ask the question, that can lead to investigation, and investigation could lead to findings that would be against their financial interests. I'm talking about big pharma, big food. And so they don't want the questions asked. They don't want the investigations done. Why is autism exploding at exponential rates? Can we infer cause and effect from certain pharmaceutical products? Well, let's investigate. Well, there's no need because there's no proof of any connection. Yeah, there's no proof because no investigation has been done. We need a large scale check and take a large population of kids who have not had a certain pharmacological intervention against a large group of kids who have. And let's compare. What are the rates of autism in the two groups? Is there a distinction? And then we can examine further, well, are there other mitigating factors beyond the pharmacological intervention? Are there other factors? Are there environmental factors? Are there lifestyle factors? Throw it all in there. Investigate. Ask the questions. Science done properly takes a long time. That's why that drug, thalidomide, was on the market for 5 years. For 5 years, women were taking thalidomide. And if they took it during a specific point of pregnancy, I guess when the limbs are being developed, I don't know, but what happened was children started to be born with flippers instead of fully developed arms and legs. They had what basically looked like flippers, underdeveloped arms and legs. And for 5 years, that drug stayed on the market while this continued to happen and happen and happen. And 5 years later, they finally withdrew it from the market when a definitive link was made. How many thousands of kids had to be born horribly deformed, facing a life of pain and anguish? Same thing with Pfizer in 2000. People think thalidomide is ancient history. Well, let's go into the 21st century. In 2000, from 2000 to 2005, Pfizer had an anti-inflammatory drug on the market called Bextra. And Bextra was causing deaths, heart damage, and it took 5 years before it was withdrawn from the market. Five years of people suffering heart attacks and heart damage and death before it finally got removed from the market. Resulted in a major lawsuit being launched against Pfizer, with some parties calling for Pfizer to be completely shut down. Crazy, crazy world. And the world is going to get more interesting now. The Trump presidency, there are some things that I'm liking. I liked the fact that he made the obvious declaration that there are two genders, male and female. Bravo. What's next? Are you going to sign an executive order declaring the sky is blue? As I said in my last video, it's amazing to me that we have to have a government an executive order to state basic objective reality. That's lunacy. So what do we need? An executive order to state that the sky that we look at is blue? I've opened up my Bible to a passage that I've referenced before. It's from 2 Thessalonians. and it's about the man of lawlessness. And this world is going to get crazier and crazier and crazier. And this whole JFK, MLK, RFK, this document dump that's going to come out, that's going to be a huge distraction. Meanwhile, we have U.S. private industry, and I think global private industry, is going to be pouring somewhere in the neighborhood of as much as $500 billion, and who knows, maybe even more, $500 billion into creating massive data centers and power generation units to fuel the artificial intelligence revolution, and is going to make the United States the leader in artificial intelligence. You talk about, giving the state or giving non-state players the ability to surveil the population 24/7, 365. We're talking about, he signed another executive order or a declaration that the United States was going to be the world leader in cryptocurrency, which is what, a central bank digital currency that we always hear about. That's what it is. It's a cryptocurrency where you have this blockchain that details encrypted every single transaction, so you know where that money has gone as it's passed from person to person to person. No more here, granddad, grandma slipping their grandchild $5 to go down to the store and buy a bag of chips and a chocolate bar. Although goodness knows, maybe 10 would be better, whatever. No more doing that without Big Brother being aware of what you're doing. No more going out and playing a game of Texas Hold'em with your friends, because there'll be no more hard currency. This is a frightening world that we are entering into. It is Orwellian. And, as I say, now, would things have been better under Biden? No. I'm beginning to form the very fixed opinion that it was simply a question of which dystopian future was on the table. With Donald Trump, it's going to be moving toward the direction of the corporate sector. The corporate sector in charge, and the corporate sector having government at its beck and call. So it's the corporate sector, the billionaire class calling the shots and who's going to be doing its bidding, but the US government and other government agencies. That's the dystopian future we're heading to now. Under the Biden administration, and certainly under the Trudeau, Mark Carney version that's coming along, is a similar. It's just as dystopian, but rather than the private corporate sector being the powerful entity, it'll be the government that is there directing things. And I strongly suspect that movement is being directed largely by, to say it as Donald Trump would, China. The Chinese are behind it. It's China who is behind, and which makes sense. If you get down to the core of Marxist ideology, Marx in his books, the Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, everything is about the means of production. Who owns the means of production? In a communist state, the government owns the means of production. In a fascist state, the private sector owns the means of production. And remember that World War II largely it was a battle largely between these two competing ideologies, communist Soviet Union and fascist Russia. And we, the free West, sided with the communists. Uncle Joe Stalin, one of the biggest mass murderers in human history, Joseph Stalin, bigger murderer than Hitler. He starved his own population towards achieving his Bolshevik utopia. And Machiavellian to the core. It didn't matter how many children died, how many people were murdered, how many people starved to death, towards, creating this communist paradise that he had built up in his mind, that the Bolshevik ideologues had created in their minds, and what the horrors. And then you look at Mao with his great leap forward. That was the way it was branded. I don't know the Chinese words, but English translated into great leap forward. Who could be against that? It's progressive. We're leaping forward. And these branding games that they play by, it's progressive, it's care, it's, it's inclusionary, it's tolerant. They put all these positive labels on things to seduce a stupid, dumbed down population that just looks at headlines, only reads the description and say, well, it's got to be a good thing. It's tolerant, it's loving, it's care, it's inclusive. All these are good things. So whatever's behind those words has to be equally good. No, it's lipstick on a pig. We are in trouble. Now I've got Danny talking about, don't get your hand, get back to the JFK. Don't get your hands dirty, get someone else to do it. That's exactly what I think happened. I think they muddied the waters so much that we'll never know who did it. That's going back. And Danny's equally writing that we must pray for RFK. We're to pray for our leaders. We're to pray for our leaders, people in political positions of power, to be open to and to allow godly wisdom to direct their whatever it is they do. Hank, with respect, I'm assuming this is with respect to George H.W. Bush, the elder, becoming, he's saying it was January 30th, 1976. I believe you're saying that's when you checked. That's when George H.W. became director of the CIA. Yeah, I knew it couldn't be back in the 60s. He was way too young. Danny's writing, as he always does. He always calls COVID 1984, and he's saying, welcome to 1984, folks. Enjoy your stay. Brett is writing, how about that China, you Mr. Trump impersonator? No, impressionist. I'm not an impersonator. Little minor distinction, but an impersonator is someone who wants you to believe that he actually is the person he's portraying, to impersonate someone. I'm not impersonating Trump. I'm doing an impression. How good, bad, or otherwise it is. A lot of people like it. I think I do it decent. I'm not the best out there, obviously. There's some guy, a big young kid, who does him brilliant, perfect. I love the one where he talks about killing Baghdadi or something like that, and he does that. Oh, bang on the money. Sounds like you close your eyes, you're listening to Trump. It's got every little nuance of the way he talks down pat. Danny's writing, they've used Orwell's 1984 as an instruction manual and not a dystopian novel. I often wonder to what degree was George Orwell dialed in to perhaps Masonic circles, so it wasn't so much a novel as he already had the script. And the circumstances under which Orwell died, going into the hospital with what was thought to be a reasonably mild ailment and then suddenly dying, were there some powerful interests who had it in for George Orwell because he was, issuing spoiler alerts with Animal Farm and with 1984. Those are his two seminal novels. I'm just trying to catch up on the last. Danny's writing, leaping the lemmings over the cliff blindly. Yeah. If you don't know what lemmings are, look it up. Rodent type figure. They'll go plunging over the cliff. Let's see what Trump proposed. Gina Brett. What? Okay. So I'm all caught up on the chat. I want to spend the last few minutes talking about and Hank Holliday is writing something that I think is prescient. Looking ahead, he's saying, believe me, the deep state, they're just lying low. They're just waiting for the dust to settle. Oh, there very well could be a battle brewing. I think, basically speaking, it's two heads of a beast that are going to start going at each other. One, a communistic beast going up against the fascist beast. And neither one is good. Would you rather live in a fascist dictatorship or a communist dictatorship? I'd rather live in a democracy, thank you very much. But that's not the way we're being steered. We're being steered into an authoritarian type system. I think it's just a question of whether it's more fascist or more communist in nature. And I would call it neo-fascist and neo-Marxist, neo-communist, because communism has evolved over the years, and the Chinese have, to a degree, I'll say, perfected it to the extent that they've recognized that you need an element of private enterprise, but with heavy-handed government oversight. So they have their stock exchanges, they have their private businesses, but those businesses are beholden to their government overlords. So they give them a modicum of freedom to unleash the entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial capital that drives an economy, but they've got a big leash around their neck called the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party. And conflict is coming. And I was listening to an interview with Jordan, or a podcast with Jordan Peterson. And I realized that I talk to a lot of people and I ask you, and a lot of people do not know who Jordan Peterson is, or they're only vaguely familiar and have never consumed any of his content, or if they have, they haven't found it engaging. And I've had people say that, oh, he just throws out word salads. He loves his big words. And, he loves talking about Dostoevsky and, the brothers Karamazov and Crime and Punishment, and about arcane novels that I've never read. And so the references don't mean anything to me, blah, 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 blah. And I think there's some fairness in the criticism, because he's certainly, I don't even know if I'm using the word right, erudite, E-R-U-I-D-T-E. I have these words sometimes in my head, but I'm not always sure I use them right. He's an incredibly intelligent man, incredibly well-read. His intelligence is primarily, to my mind, linguistic in nature. He's very precise in his language. And that's why he uses, instead of having saying that someone has a strong tendency towards XYZ behavior, he'll always use the word proclivity. And these words get injected into the public discourse. Disingenuous. Longest time, that was a big one. Well, you're being disingenuous. And I swear, half the time I think the people using the word didn't even know what it meant. Disingenuous. The other word that's all over the vocabulary now is narcissism. Oh, and you throw it out. Oh, you're being narcissistic. You're a narcissist. And I swear, half the time the people either using it against someone or the people they're lobbing it at don't even really know what it means. And the simple fact of the matter is that everyone has a degree of narcissism. We all have a degree of self-love. We better, it's a sense of self-worth. Narcissism, of course, is when it goes to the extreme where you become almost a god. And anyway, that little sidetrack aside, I was watching Jordan Peterson doing this interview, and a young kid was asking him, young kid who's a social influencer and a writer, and an anarchist, a political anarchist. And there's more to that than what most people think about anarchy, and they think it's an invitation to chaos. And it's more nuanced than that, but it's too complicated to go into in depth. I don't fully understand it. But it's not, we have a tendency to reduce things to the most simple things so that we can wrap our head around it. But sometimes things are complicated. But anyway, this kid was asking Jordan Peterson about the fact that he said, I've been on the dark web and I've seen some horrific things, he said. I've seen we've all seen pornography, but when you get into the dark web, it's pornography that involves little kids and infants. And how can anyone get that far, that evil, that demonic? How is that possible? And Peterson said, do you really want to know? Because it's dark. And he went into about a 15-minute explanation as to, and it wasn't as dark as you might think listening to him on the surface, because he talks in a very clinical fashion, but it is dark. And he gets into the Bible and he talks about the story of Cain and Abel. And I've spoken about this before, echoing what Peterson has said, but he's spoken about this so many different times, and I've heard him approach it from slightly different angles and flesh it out even more. And the way he frames the story of Cain and Abel is and he uses that as an archetype to describe how a person descends into this demonic depth that we're seeing more and more of in this world. And the story of Cain and Abel is the story that I'm going to tell in my next video, because I've already gone on too long. I want to keep this shorter. I don't want to go over an hour. And to get into this, and I think it's something very important. And I know that some, for whatever reason, good, bad, or otherwise, don't like Jordan Peterson, and that's fair enough. We all have, I'm sure that some people will come across my video and say, oh, this guy's an idiot. Screw him. I don't, what a moron. And that's fair enough. We all have our tastes. We all have our, there's no one size fits all. But I think the information that Jordan Peterson is putting out there is incredibly instructive, especially as we head into what are going to be very interesting times over the coming, I think it's going to be weeks and months and years. And I think we are moving toward that time that Christians refer to as the tribulation. For a long time, I was speculating that, heck, we might be in the tribulation. Certainly during the COVID era, at the start of it, I was thinking, is this the tribulation? Is this the start? Are we in the first 3.5 years? And I've walked that back. I don't think we're there yet. But we are moving in that direction. And when we get to 2 Thessalonians and we read from chapter 2, verse 3, it says, let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first. This is talking about the second coming. When these Thessalonians, the people in this church, want to know when the second coming is coming, and Paul is saying, let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. Do you not remember that when I was still with you, I told you this? So he's reinforcing something that he told them in person. And sadly, he's assuming prior knowledge. And he says, and you know what is restraining him now, so that he may be revealed in his time. So this son of perdition, this the man of lawlessness, is being restrained And you know what, and you know what is restraining him now, but he doesn't tell them because he's already told them. That whatever is restraining it is getting out of the way. I don't think Paul implies here that's going to happen like, all of a sudden floodgates open. I think we're seeing, and he writes to that, for the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains it will do so until he is out of the way. Who he is, we don't know. Paul told them when he was still with them, when he was at that specific church. And he told them more, I assume, morally. And now he's just reinforcing a teaching without giving the teaching again. Something's getting pulled out of the way. And I do think it ties in. I think the Bible is hyper-connected. Danny wrote it out a while ago, how many tens of thousands of connections there are in the Bible. I think I can find a connection between this and the story of Cain and Abel. And that's going to be the subject of my next video, because we are coming to interesting times, and you better have the armor of God on. You better gird up your loins, to use an Old Testament reference, and get ready. And set your aim straight, aiming toward the divine, the highest possible truth, and get into relationship with God. Get down on your knees and pray. Give thanks for this wondrous creation. Give thanks that God is in control. Give thanks that he sent his son to die on a cross to atone for the transgressions of us, a fallen, broken creation. So I'm going to end it there. I'll keep it just in and around an hour. I won't read it, but I'll my truncated version of the blessing that Aaron spoke over God's covenant chosen people, the Israelites, while they were wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. Kind of like us. A lot of times right now, it can feel like you're wandering in the wilderness, but Aaron spoke these words. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. And may the Lord grant you peace. That's the shortened version. If you want to read the full version, go to the end of chapter 6 in the book of Numbers. So God bless. I'll read the last few comments. You're welcome, Brett. Challenge everything I say, please. Ecclesiastes, nothing new under the sun. Just reading last few. Denny's given me the number 65,000 connections in the Bible. And if you haven't read it, I would strongly urge to at least go through the book of Genesis, because that's such a foundational book. So much, that's the start. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So wish you all a good night, and probably be talking to you tomorrow night, because and it's going to be a heavy-handed subject. And if you enjoy my videos somewhat, a lot, a little, and you're inclined to, I would appreciate it if you would hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. We'll talk to you all tomorrow. God bless.